What's good, everybody? We are back. Now, check this out. I have done two videos that I think is very important that you go watch, because if you don't know about this news, you're going to be completely confused on what it is that we're talking about. One of which I talked about this goofy looking Wonder Woman 1984 tie-in comic book variant cover. Go watch that. There's another one where I discuss what's happening with DC as they're having, DC Comics that is, they're having a bunch of layoffs, firings, and so forth. Some are calling it a bloodbath. A third of their editorial staff, for example, was fired or were fired. And it looks like DC Universe, that whole team got laid off. Things are getting a little crazy over there. And I think you need to watch those two videos because it gives you perspective, and that's going to be the topic of what we're discussing today. Now, there's this man by the name of Andy Corey. He is well, before I explain who he is, let me just show you what the man had to say. Now, this here was actually in response to a post by way of, I believe her name is Robin Eisenberg. And who she is the person that is responsible for that goofy cover that you got of Wonder Woman 1984, with Wonder Woman looking very silly. That was her. And she made this post basically talking about strength and beauty can come in lots of awesome forms. I don't think one form negates the others. And she's basically talking about her experience, and they're obviously wording it as if it's this negativity surrounding that comic book cover that was announced because, yes, it got crapped on. Now, moving on. Well, hold on. Let me show you this. Now, check this out. There's a guy by the name of Andy Corey. He says, Robin, I'm a DC editor. This was 5 days ago. And I love your work. The reaction to the Wonder Woman cover on Twitter was provoked by a small group of trolls and is not representative of the larger, sophisticated, and enthusiastic readership I've come to know. Your art is inspiring, and your response is wonderful. Now, Andy Corey, he's let you know that he was is a DC editor, and this was 5 days ago. You may want to make note of this that I'm going to show you. That a guy by that same name, which is very unique, Andy Corey, was actually part of the group that was laid off. As it says here in this Sci-Fi Wire article, it says, and editors-in-chief Bob, yada, 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 but it says, and Andy Corey, our industry veteran, said to be some of the fiercest defenders of traditional comic business within DC's Burbank offices, letting them go now since the message that the old DC is gone. So, they're gone. He was one of them. I think that's probably why, though he seemed to be a little active on Twitter, he has not posted anything as of this video. 4 days before was the last, 4 or 5 days before was the last time that he actually posted something. So he says, I'm a DC editor. Looks like that was right around the time that he got the news, and we all got the news as well, that he was let go. Now, that sucks, and I mean that genuinely. I don't like people losing their jobs. I've been very defensive of people's livelihoods. Of course, when the government has these sort of arbitrary lockdowns, people are going to misspeak and say, well, the virus, the pandemic did this. No. The government making it illegal for people to move around and locking folks down is what did a lot of this and lost a lot of people's jobs and livelihoods and so forth. Nonetheless, I don't like people losing their job. However, when you consider some of the things that this man said, maybe he should not have been in the position that he was in. Now, I take issue with what the man said, and I think that's what we really need to emphasize. He said, keep in mind, the reaction to the Wonder Woman cover on Twitter was provoked by a small group of trolls and is not representative of the larger, sophisticated, and enthusiastic readership. So he's saying that the folks that are, and by the way, this is a post, if I didn't mention, this is a post where she gives her thoughts and he's coming to her defense saying that, hi, I'm over at DC. And these guys, they're just trolls. I take issue with that because like a lot of other folks that are in these positions, completely oblivious as they think that they are the majority position. They are the majority of the industry and they understand. And this is why it's hard for me to defend this guy getting fired, because maybe it's the silver lining is that he probably shouldn't have been in that damn position. He doesn't even know the market. So depending on what he was editing or what capacity it was, I mean, a lot of the trash that's been put out flying on his desk and he's like, yeah, ship it, whatever. Look, the reality of the situation is that we're consumers, right? People need to come to terms with the fact that Twitter, Instagram, and sites like that are not necessarily representative of certain industry or even a demographic at large, It's very misleading. It's a useful tool, don't get me wrong, but it can be very misleading. When you consider the type of demographic like Twitter really attracts, the ones that are very active, it's not a significant amount of, let's say, the population in terms of the ones that are actually active on Twitter. And it can be misleading. You can create this echo chamber and what you think translates into sales does not. Folks like myself are at the comic book shop every Wednesday and we took issue with the goofy cover. Trolls? Small group of trolls? Of course that's what they call us. That's the cop-out. It has been. Just call them trolls. Just label the people that are being critical of your work as just people that are just doing what they do and trolling, just trying to stir up stuff. And there's this other sophisticated, enthusiastic readership that they come to know, that he comes to know as an editor for DC, a mainstream comic book publishing company. He come to know. Bro, you're completely out of touch, oblivious. If you think that a significant portion of the comic book fan base, consumer, aren't the ones that take issue with that book or that cover. Now, there may be a bunch of people liking your post, retweeting you on Instagram and stuff like that. That doesn't mean they own a box, a short box or a long box. That doesn't mean they're at the comic book shop every Wednesday. That don't mean they're reading your books. But there's so many people that just don't understand that. So they say stupid stuff like this. And this guy is an editor and he's out of touch. Completely out of touch, if that's the conclusion that he's coming to. You guys can keep this up and keep trying to limit us to trolling, limit us to trolls, people that are acting in bad faith. That's dishonest and it's lazy. It's legitimate criticism. The cover was goofy. Period. That's just what it was. And again, I'm willing to bet I own more Wonder Woman comic books than all of these other cats that would dare defend that garbage. I'm willing to put that to the test with the vast majority of those folks that like your posts and retweet your posts. Let's do it. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some comic book geeks out there that may be defending that piece of trash. But to act like folks like myself, actual consumers that are still consumers, one of the few out there that actually have a pull list these days, to act like we aren't actually representative of the readership, again, it's dishonest, it's lazy. But that's where we're at now. These people conjure up realities. And now this doofus is out of a job, and it sucks that he's out of a job, but maybe the silver lining is that he should not have that position in the first place. He allowed something else to cloud his judgment. And I think that's really what's happening right now in mainstream comics as they keep trying to cater to non-comic book readers. And then wonder well, why aren't people buying their books? Or they point to these short-term successes when you look at, on average, the fact that books aren't being bought as much. And people take that and they act as if the reason that is because the industry's changing. Or they'll just blame it on me because they say, oh, well, you're kicking people, you're gatekeeping, you're kicking people out, and then they see your videos and then they don't want to be part of a comic book culture. You're stupid. You got nothing to do with nothing. The books are trash. This is why they can do reprints, and the reprints do better than the current books. There's a reason that happens. And it's not because the digital age or anything like that. Comic books is all about having the damn physical copies. That's what it's about, right? Not saying there aren't people that'll read a digital comic every now and then, but to act like the consumer base isn't there is complete bogusness. Makes absolutely no sense. The consumer base is there. The demographic is still there, and if the books were quality, they'd be willing to read it a lot more often, purchase it, put it on their pull list. But because a lot of it's trash, not all of it, but a lot of it's trash, and then we get issue number 1 or this variant of Wonder Woman 1984, and that's trash too. Come on, bro. And that's the problem with the industry. And now I'm not talking about the consumers. I'm talking about the people that call the shots and put the book out, or at least a part of the creation process in some capacity. That's their issue. They form realities that aren't really there, right? It's not representative of the actual realm that we are living in. They shouldn't be in their position. And it sucks that they are, because we get to see characters that we've known, come to love, get ran into the damn ground. And then they looking at us like we the problem. You the problem. They'll never admit that they are the ones that are part of the issue. They'll never admit that. God forbid that there's a content issue with your books. They will never concede that point. Instead, they'll blame it on everybody else. They'll say it's the trolls. They'll say it's all of these other things are going on. Even with this pandemic, even though the pandemic this was inevitable, what was happening here with DC. But they'll blame everything else. And when someone dares to say en masse, or groups of people say this is garbage, they look at you like you a troll, because how dare you criticize they piece of trash? Because it's a masterpiece according to them. And that's how friggin' oblivious that these weirdos are. And the industry, from the mainstream standpoint, does not change until there are people that are in those positions, specifically in positions of powers, that can get a grip and say, there's no way we're putting that out. And that takes a certain kind of man, that takes a certain kind of woman to sit up there and say, get out of my office, or don't send me, you sending me that and I got to send you an email and say, this is trash, redo it or you're off. This is not how the character would act. This is not what our consumers want. This is not what they expect, right? Until there's some people that are going to be willing to do that, they'll keep putting out garbage, from the artwork on to the actual stories. They'll put out that trash, and then when it has to get criticized by folks like myself, of course, they'll blame it on us and say it's our fault, because they can't ever admit that their content just ain't cutting it.